It's the welcome to the Story of the Apprentice podcast. This is how we start things, right? It's we are been off a little bit. It's a podcast where we talk about D&D, storytelling, other things. Honestly, eventually probably moving away from D&D. I'm getting tired of this one. I'm doing my own stuff. We talk about the story of one of us becoming a professional GM and what's that like and yada yada yada. I am one of the co-hosts, Jesse T. William, and with me, as always, read the name that I gave you. I don't say anything else.
I all right. Torque to the extreme.
That doesn't
That's
sound,
me.
it doesn't sound
I
like you really believe that.
I
I
need to
think
like
someone with that name would have a bit more of a
channel the
drive.
extreme
Yeah, channel the
energy.
extreme.
I
I would
need
like
to
to see that.
get extreme right now. I don't
I
know how
feel
to
like it has
get
to start at the torque. It has to torque to the extreme. Like I feel like that's the most energy I've put into anything in the last 5 years of my life. Um, the only time I've put more energy into something in the last 5 years is when I was brought to like my lowest moment of frustration with someone. That's the only time I've made a sound louder than that just now. So go ahead, make another pass, please, at Torque to the extreme.
Okay, I'm sorry. Hold on. I've got to really
That person who you mentioned who listens to everything in your house or hears everything in your house, I want them to hear
You
it and question you
want
about.
them to hear this.
Yeah.
Okay, he's not upstairs, but if he hears everything, like he says, I'm not gonna yell. I don't like yelling.
I don't
uh,
either, but I also live alone right now. My windows are open, so people will probably hear if I
I
say
I
things too loud.
I'm a yelly person, but I don't like yelling.
Mm.
I need to channel the energy. So many people, you know, the vine, the she came down in a fucking bubble, Doug Vine, you know. People have said that that's like who I am as a person, but I
Mm.
don't like when I do the yell. So I need to
Mm.
channel whatever gets me to that zone. Usually when somebody says something about like any piece of media I disagree with, that's the energy I need to channel for this.
I think that and this is not an opinion of held by a podcast or either of the hosts of the podcast.
Oh.
I think Star Wars has gone too woke. Um, uh, a black female lead in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show.
Whoa! What the
does
fuck?
that channel the go get okay, take that
Does that
and
channel torque to the extreme?
hey, there
Are
we
you
go.
asking me?
That sounds like torque to the extreme. Tucker, why are we here today?
Ah, fucking God. To talk about D&D.
I that's right. That's the best opening to any of our shows. We need to maintain that level of energy through the rest of
Moving
these.
forward,
If we
yeah.
want to have longevity, if we want to gain in these new viewers, if you want to be an exciting, topical, young, hip, but insightful Dungeons and Dragons podcast, we're not there yet. We're getting there. We're trying to
Yeah.
be a bit better at being entertaining. I have my own criticisms of myself, but torn to the extreme.
You torque to the
Um,
extreme.
you said we were talking earlier today. We talk a lot to each other on and off the pod, and you said that you had some little ideas, little
I
thinkers.
have to remember. Oh, fuck. I almost fucked
Ooh,
off. I almost freaked my shit. I have to
also,
remember like what all my notes were. Um,
sorry, I was just checking. I mean to
mhm.
dip out. I can just
Yeah, you can just leave.
and then yeah, I disappear. Perfect. It's a perfect little clip.
Yeah,
Anyways,
you can
sorry.
just go.
I can just go whenever.
I have to remember like my notes. I know there are things I wanted to talk about, especially as I've started to like really get into some of my games. Like it's I've just like have more thoughts in general the more that I move forward. Um, but I have to like this today earlier. my brain was moving, and then I got became a little sleepy man, and so I need to get my brain moving again.
Yeah.
Um,
Did
it is
Tornked to the
funny.
extreme not get your
I
brain
I
moving?
need to continue with that energy. But
I've
here's the thing: it's because it was a great thing to use Star Wars because I do frequently get torqued to the extreme with Star Wars.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
new way I'm going to like express myself is like I'm gonna get torn to the extreme. You better
Please
watch the
do,
fuck
please.
out.
Oh no, we're getting torched to the extreme here. We go.
You gotta calm down, guys.
This
And
is that's a viral clip right there of torqued to the extreme. Um,
but I get that way about Star. And it's funny because I actually was talking about Star Wars in relation to D&D recently, but it was because I was talking about how much I don't like J.J. Abrams, and that I
mhm.
really wish he had not touched the last trilogy. I wish he
um,
hadn't put his grubby little hands on it.
agreed. Can let's talk about stuff because honestly, fantasy space opera. I'm gonna say okay. I'm gonna say an opinion. I'm gonna say an
Oh,
opinion.
I'm really
So
excited.
I think the only thing that you can say about the Force Awakens that is good is that it is perfectly reverent to at least the original trilogy of Star Wars. It's perfectly
Mm,
reverent to that. And we were talking a couple of weeks ago about how one of the most important factors to Star Wars is the reverence it has for itself.
hmm.
So someone is in a scene and being like the Glamulon blah 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 galaxy is doing this, and it's like a naughty, it's just like a background piece of dialogue, like the glub shito type stuff, like all that or like they hold reverence for that. And whether it is like intentionally campy or not, that's what makes good Star Wars. That's why I feel like a
Yeah.
couple of the recent episodes of The Mandalorian have been kind of doing well. So Force Awakens is perfectly reverent. Snoke is a stupid fucking villain who shouldn't have been introduced. I'm so glad they killed him in The Last Jedi. The my favorite part of The Last Jedi is like Snoke is such a dumb villain. It's just Palpatine. It's just Palpatine. It's
Yeah, pretty
so
much,
much
yeah.
Palpatine that they in the final movie when they wanted to like, they were afraid of the fans. They were like, actually, he was Palpatine, and people were like, that makes sense. It shouldn't be. Snoke is a dumb villain, and I'm glad he was killed in the way that he was killed. And Kylo Ren should have been the only villain in the last episode. But
Yeah.
that is like the big. I okay. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna
Uh-huh.
shut up because I can really get going on this. I've come to realize. I heard an opinion a long time ago about The Last Jedi, which is that it is not a good Star Wars movie. And I've come to realize
Yeah.
why that's true because it does not hold reverence in the correct way. However, um, uh, that's just a random thing I thought I should get out there. I do like that movie, um, mostly. But I saw it's that but's unrelated also to me liking it. I saw this video. I saw this fucking person. He made like an hour and a half, like 2 hour long video about why The Last Jedi was a poor subversion of expectations and how Knives Out did it better. Like Ryan Johnson did it better in this other movie. And it was like he went through like literally all the thing like the things because the way Knives Out does it is that it subverts the expectations, but then it's still the same thing, right? And like this guy went through and just completely missed the point of everything he was saying. And the thing that was central around that was this idea that Snoke was an interesting villain that shouldn't have been killed. And it's like
Mm,
Snoke was a dumb villain to begin with. That trope is a bad trope that should be subverted. But also the trope of having, a main like big evil character Sith dude in Kylo Ren is the good subversion of that trope. It's like, oh, he turns against his boss because this is bad, but he's still bad just in a different way. Good storytelling, I think. Anyways, that's all I want to say. I've literally thought about this video maybe like once a month for the past 4 or 5 years of just like that fucking guy. What a dumb opinion. That's what I
that
hate
was fucking
about
guy.
the yeah. Um I've never expressed it. I've kept it to myself. I didn't even comment on that video. That's because I'm a regular person. Instead of complaining about the Last Jedi every day on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram, I shut up about it. And I'm expressing it this one time on this podcast about Dungeons and Dragons. I'm sure people who listen, who play in our games, will probably have things to say about that. Not looking forward to it.
That's
I'm gonna
and
suck it up.
they, you know what? They can say whatever they want to say, okay? I am
They
very
can
like
get in the comments, stay out of my DMs. I have
I
enough
have a
messages that is.
I have a strong like I have strong media opinions, like very strong media opinions. And for a while I was like, I'm just gonna sit in front of a camera and bitch. I have an entire, by the way, I have an entire like 7-page script written about the Umbrella Academy and every issue that I have with the first season.
You should fucking record it. You should do that.
It's I have to I feel like I'd have to go rewatch the first season and then look at my script again so I actually like remember what the fuck I was talking about. But I remember I sat down and watched the Umbrella Academy and I was like, oh no, you don't get away with this, Gerard Way. I love Gerard Way, but I watched that shit and I was like, I fucking hate everyone. I was so upset. I didn't hate that show. I just didn't like it
Mm.
mostly, most of it. And I thought everybody else was wrong. Um, and I will sit there and think everybody, and that's how I am about media. Is I like I feel very strong, and I'll find one of my roommates and I'll rant to them for 3 hours, and I'll like run through the entirety of the thing I watched and everything that was wrong with it, and how everybody else who has opinions on this is wrong as well. And that's the she came down in a bubble version. That's torqued to the extreme.
It's
But it's
getting
had very
torqued straight
it's
up.
such strong opinions. I had a lot of opinions when I first watched the last Star Wars trilogy. They've calmed down a little bit because it's been so long about those specific movies. But I just remember being like so disappointed. I was actually talking to somebody about this in relation to D&D uh recently, which about like just being really disappointed about J.J. Abrams having any say in those movies because I fundamentally disagree with the way he views storytelling and the way he views movies. His little mystery box.
I've heard about this mystery box, and I
Fucking
agree.
idiot. You fucking stupid dumbass. I saw a video recently that also talked about J.J. Abrams' dumb mystery box. And then there was a quote they gave by another director. I don't remember his name. Who gives like a very different view where his whole thing was like, movies are empathy machines and
Mm.
storytelling is an empathy machine. It's meant to connect us to life experiences that we wouldn't otherwise experience, which is I could say a lot of things about like the way that the way that I consume movies and TV shows, um because like for a while I really wanted to be a screenwriter and I really wanted to work in media. And so I was going to college for that. And I mean, it's everything you learn about there too. It's really shaped like the way that I story tell, especially given, or like even the way that I write books and stuff like that. Because he's completely right. They are little empathy machines. And like if you look at the history of media, uh, it it all connects so very deeply. Not that D&D is necessarily like this big media thing that is used to like introduce a concept to the masses. However, it still is a little empathy machine.
Yeah, I think TTRPGs. You can tell I have opinions or something to say when I go
So you're a
from like
little
back here
to like
to like I'm like I nah, I'm excited, and I have a problem with shutting up. But yeah, the thing that I love about D&D, is the like accessing emotion through characters and
mm-hmm.
empathizing. Like fucking like I for the most part, um I have been like more emotionally put together than most of the NPCs that I have. Usually the NPCs are the like advice parent ones of my NPCs are just some watered down version of me to some extent. I played a character recently who had this like bright, yeah, you met him, Emil, had this just like happy, like powerful brightness that I was like, oh, I'm gonna start actively being like that, because there's something about that character who is not like blind to the ills of the world. He's very much been fighting against them, but he knows that it's more important to bring positivity into the world, even when it is sad. There are things to be grateful for, like the whole Santa scene. I'll explain it for listeners so they have context. But basically, one of my players joined with a character, and he was like, "Oh, my character was at this thing," and another player said, "Oh, my character was also at this thing, but two different campaigns." So I took those two little fellas and I put them together, and I was like, "Hey, you guys were at the same thing. How'd you meet there? What happened? Where did you depart?" And they came up with a little story. They were talking for a little bit, and then the first fella left the games because of the OGL stuff. And I do blame him, and I'm mad at him. But also, it's life stuff. A lot of people are like in the past couple of months, it's beginning to wane a bit, but are leaving games because capitalism. Um, but so this character or this player leaves, and as is the standard, I kill off the character. But that means that long con, like separating and then reuniting, couldn't be paid off. But there was this character who he was traveling with who kind of exited around the same that campaign the same time that he did, this NPC named Emil, who already kind of had an importance in the storytelling of the world for other reasons. So I was like, I remember describing, not as any of the characters saw it, but just to the players. Um, I think it was in like one of the Wednesday crossovers. But this character's death, just to kind of, I don't know, show the players something, because that's fun sometimes. I do that a lot with other characters and campaigns. I'll just give little scenes here and there of like, here's something else that's happening that's thematically tied into what you're doing. But so I show this character's death, and I thought that Emil would have been with that character, and like kind of failed to save him. I kind of like used up my spell slots, used up my lay on hands. He's a paladin. And so I got to run this scene where a very real character to me, being the like PC, someone who was very familiar with and had this relationship with this NPC, got to express that grief. But it was also like he'd heard about this other person. He talked about this other person, the person who died. And look at where you are. Like he would have been happy to see you, and that's something. Like I'm meeting you, and that's something special. Even though we're
Mm.
grieving this person, I'm grieving this person. It hurts me to like relive this. I had this moment of like I'm like crying and smiling, which was aspirationally, but like that is a revelation that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't been playing D&D a million times a week the last 20 million years. Um, so many. We're going to loop back to the Force or this Jabrams for a second
His mystery box.
and his mystery box, because that's also bad world building. It's bad world building when you structure a campaign. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know everything, but
Mm-mm.
you do need to know the start to finish. You do need to know what these characters means, what the villain means, what they're connected to, what the end game is. You have to. It's the great line. I don't know if you're a Marvel fan. I don't know how much we talk about it, but in Avengers Endgame, the start, the first line is like, um uh see where you're going, it's time to get there. It's like a person aiming a bow or something like that. And it's like that's like, you have to see where you're going. It's a really weird line. I'm not super reverent about the quality of Marvel movies. I love Marvel, but if tomorrow people were like, all Marvel movies are done, I'd be like, well, that sucks, but I'll live.
Yeah.
But anyways, I that's a good like phrase to describe it. So bad fucking world building, mystery
Yeah.
box shit. Um, uh, Pass it
I
back to
tend
you, Tork,
to
to the extreme.
it's me. I'm extreme. I tend to like as but I when I'm running D&D, I know like the big I have like four like things, you know? These are big things. is the beginning, and then there's something that'll happen around here, and there's something that'll happen around here that kind of is like shit's getting more intense, and then the fucking how it's gonna end, the thing, you know? And that thing can change as we go. And it will never change like too extremely, but like the way this shit can sometimes your party just does something and you're like, oh, what an interesting choice. And this has changed like the way that I've decided to think about it. But for the most part, yeah, I pretty much always like know where that's going. And I have there is a lot of mystery in my games, but I always have an answer. There's an answer. It's J.J. Abrams falls into the same hole as like what's his name? Stephen Moffat? Is that his name? The fucking Doctor Who guy. He did the same thing, and that's why nobody like fucking likes Doctor Who anymore. Um, you're it's so cool that you haven't watched Doctor Who. It's so not
I've
cringe of you.
I've I've watched a little bit of the there so years like 2014, 2015, maybe
Mhm,
2016, one of those years around Christmas time, there was a Doctor Who marathon on the Space Channel in
mhm,
Canada, and I caught almost all the episodes that I've seen of Doctor Who I caught in that time. So a bit of Tennant's run, a bit of Smith's run. It might have been even before Capaldi came in. I've been like aware of this space. I
yeah,
hear the nerd chatter. It makes its way onto my feeds and everything. And I interact with a lot of people who are
yeah.
who fuckers. But anyways,
I
I
used to
yeah.
be a Doctor Who fucker. Went to club in middle school and then like continued me and my brother. Sometimes he's like, "Can we watch Doctor Who? I know you don't like it anymore, but can we just watch it together to be like nostalgic?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I primarily watched from Eccleston to Matt Smith. Um, I and Matt Smith is like important to me in the fact that he's technically the first Doctor I ever witnessed, but I think Eccleston I like him better than Tennant and I like him better than Smith. With this a controversial opinion, I know a few people are gonna not be happy with me for that.
Speaking of Eccleston, have you seen the show The Leftovers?
No, were you
Okay.
okay?
Fucking that is my favorite. Speaking of a mystery box, it's not a mystery box. World building. Um, um,
Okay.
so Christopher Eccleston is one of the people in it. The premise of the show is that 3% of the world's population disappears. Just
Okay.
one day,
Gone.
all at once, gone. What the fuck? Or something like that. And it has Justin Thoreau, who that was like his kind of not his big. He's worked a lot, but like that he became kind of like a like minor A-list, like B-list celebrity. Like just
Mm-hmm.
a really he's a really good actor. It's fucking great in that show. I love that show so much. But it's like very serious and sad, but also like really weird in its storytelling in like a good way. Like it's like it all like makes sense. The kind of like the fucked up shit people do and how like regular it is and how weird the show is. It's like funny, but not in a way that's like haha funny, but it's like that's that's fucked up funny. But so
Mm,
3% of the world's population disappears. And the big question is like, what happened? And there are all these different answers. Everyone has a different idea. There are cults that start. There's all this stuff, and it gets weird and wacky. Um, um, and they give an answer. Like the show gets so weird, but it all there's like a logic to everything. They give an answer in the end of it's only 3 seasons. They give an answer in the end of the show, and it is the best answer to like a mystery because it's beautifully simple. It's so fucking beautiful. And it reframes the whole show. It's just fucking great storytelling. And it's like there's it was books beforehand, to be fair. It was books, but like just and it has, I imagine, remembering things about it now because it's been a while since I've watched it, so many like emotional and human elements to it. I love that. It's just a great story. Um uh and as someone who like strives to want to be able to tell good stories through I like TTRPGs.
Mm.
Just fucking great. Yeah. I just so this it's one of my favorite. It's honestly it's my second favorite thing ever. My favorite piece of media ever is called Maniac. It's a Netflix limited series. Justin Theroux's also in it, so he might be a key to getting my
Mm.
attention. But Emma
It's
Stone
him.
and Jonah Hill are also the leads in it, and they do such a great job. Like I
When I
feel like
get yeah.
a lot of A-list celebrities don't they're not actually some of them a lot of them are bad actors. A lot of them are kind of understring. But they do phenomenal in the show. And the show has a lot of just I'm sorry, I'm geeking out about my favorite series.
When I get
Um
Netflix back, I'll watch that one.
yeah,
I don't have a
God.
Netflix right now. So I'm a poor person.
That's okay. That's
Um,
valid.
however, I do have Brick's HBO Max, and I did look over the leftovers, and it is on HBO Max. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll watch that soon.
Yeah.
Um, shout out to Brick. Thank you for signing me into your HBO Max.
If I had
Uh,
more time, I would rewatch it, but I don't. What did I interrupt you? Why did I bring up the leftovers?
oh, I mentioned Doctor Who because I was mentioning Stephen
Oh,
Moffat, and then
Christopher
yeah,
Eccleston. Right.
and then we went to J.J. Abrams, Stephen Moffat, Eccleston.
It all connects.
Yeah, but I was talking about that how he falls into the same thing about how they really like they have this like really big elaborate setup, but they don't have any answers.
Hmm.
Which I often wonder like how they fall into that trap. Because sometimes like with the world that I built now, I super didn't know like I would like come up with ideas and then there would be like a process for me of like okay, like why and where did it come from, and what is going on? Why is the question that I like am in a constant state of asking myself. It's just why
Yeah,
constantly.
that's the
Um
sorry as I adjust my blanket. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna I swear it get back. But why when I took like a creative writing class in high school, the lesson that stuck with me from that was you always keep asking why. You keep asking why.
yeah.
Anyways, continue. You're talking. You said why.
Um Well, then that is the question. Not to like fucking toot my own horn, I, but like if you understand storytelling and like if you have a good fundamental like understanding of storytelling and world building, it is the most logical question as it is. Nobody had to tell me to do that to
Mhm.
eventually be like, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who like get to a point where they're also like, oh, only it just kind of makes sense to like keep asking yourself what. So whenever I write anything, whether that be a character, and I'm like, okay, well they act like that. Why? Why do they act like that? What event? I don't even. You don't need to get too in detail even sometimes with like why that. What kind of like event led to that? But then with storytelling, um, like any single world event you could think of is like why, and then you just keep going down the layers, and same with world building. So I come up with like ideas I think are cool, and then it's why over and over and over and over again. um until I kind of narrow down to something that like makes a little bit more sense. So sometimes I don't even know how they get trapped in the mystery box and how they just like never have a satisfying answer. And it's because they don't care about contradicting themselves and making things make sense.
Mhm.
They don't care. If they think it's cool, they're going to do it. Like if I have a very cool idea and then I ask myself why, and I kind of start going down this road and I realize that it contradicts something I've already written or doesn't make sense, and I can't change the other thing, like I got to tweak it. I'm just gonna throw it in there because I think it's like cool. But J.J. Abrams and Stephen Moffat are just so content to like set up these really big, like, oh no, what's going on? What could possibly be the big mystery? But they don't have any answers. And they don't care to make their like the answer that they do end up giving consistent with what we've already been told or satisfying in any like major way. Like it always just kind of feels like, oh, well, that was fucking stupid.
You
Like I
have
really am not the thing is, right? It's like your Star Wars is too woke thing is that I have complaints about Rey as a character, but it is not every time somebody complains about Rey to me, I'm like, okay, what's your reasoning? And
Mhm.
then like I'm really suspicious and like what they say next like strongly determines
Mhm.
how I feel about
Mhm.
them.
Um, Rey's not a Skywalker. She's also not a fucking Palpatine. The one of the best things about the Last Jedi, you're a nobody. She's a regular person who is force sensitive. There's so much that can be built from that, and this
Mm.
idea of like there's so I'm not gonna get into it. I'm not gonna fucking get into it. Um
We
uh
just talk about Starbucks for an unreasonable, I mean Starbucks, Star Wars. See? Um
Starbucks, it's
it's
a
because there
bucks.
was there was so many Starbucks people in my home, or because some of my friends still work at Starbucks, and we're talking about Starbucks, and now it's back in my brain. You know how nice it has been to not really think about Starbucks at all.
It's great. I
It's so
like years
good.
later, after only working there for a couple of months, it's still every once in a while. It hasn't been since I worked in a cafe, but like years after I worked for Starbucks, I had like Starbucks dreams or nightmares where I was like, oh, I'm here again. Um,
It's terrible. I've had so many Starbucks nightmares.
oh yeah, I can imagine.
It's and like it only took like 6 months for me working at Starbucks to start having Starbucks nightmares.
Holy
Of like,
shit,
oh my
that's
God. The
way too
first
short.
the first one ever was that my manager cooked 50 bacon egg bites, put them on the counter, and told me if I didn't eat all of them in 30 minutes, I was fired.
That's
And
so
I like
specific.
I was like so panicked. I woke up like scared. I told my manager about it the next day, and he looked at me and he was like, why does your subconscious think I would make you do that?
Mm.
I don't
In
know,
building
Dan.
a
Maybe because you
mystery,
suck. But building a
in
mystery.
building mystery,
Sorry, Dan.
using the egg bites as an example. So if I were to make that into a like a plot, you have to you always you've I've already failed actually if I've done that, because if I've started at the beginning, you're done. You have to start at what's actually going on. What's going on and how is that getting diluted? So I'm running a horror anthology campaign right now. Um, Anyone who is in this campaign, Emily, Andy, David, or anyone who's thinking about joining it, stop listening right now. But the premise of this campaign is that something, and this is like a singular anomaly in the entire history of my cosmos. A singular thing from somewhere else has entered one of the planes. It's not from this cosmos. It's I'm not going to get into that because that's a big spoiler for world building, but it's entered, and it's kind of like a parasite. And it's causing this weird anomaly. So there's this one of the planes of existence in my world is the pillars of order, and it's where all divine information is recorded. So like contracts, true names, like sometimes like true love is like written on the pillars of order. And as things change, as souls dissipate, things will change out. So one of these pillars is like thousands of pillars. One of them, parasite has entered, and it's getting a little fucky. So um, it and because it's from somewhere else, all of the things that it is doing is not does not fall within the rules of magic as it works in the world. And so the people who are going to deal with this are aware that there's some weird magical anomaly. There's something weird that's not being detected. So we've been invited to investigate. And everything, but every like weird thing about how this will play out is based off of this certain established thing that is hidden behind smoke screens, and hidden behind like layers of information and diluted. That's it's not a hard thing to do, J.J. Abrams. It's not difficult to just say,
This is a
here's a thing
direct
that's
message.
happening, and here's what the audience knows about it. It's not difficult. People are going to hear me on the street. So
Good.
mysteries, folks, don't start at the beginning, start at the end. or you're not going to write a good mystery.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
But also, like, again, have maybe a little bit of an idea of what the answer to the fucking mystery is, instead
you
of just
start
making
with
it
the
up
answer.
fucking last minute.
You start the answer. Start with the answer
Mm.
always.
Um,
Um, God, it's
boy, oh
I
boy.
hate Star Wars.
Me too. And also, I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah, it's so good.
And also, I never stopped thinking about it. When I was telling you that me and Elle have
You
been
have
watching a
time to
show,
think about Star Wars? You
I
think about
I
D&D?
do. Sometimes. Mostly when I am thinking about, oh my God, I can see my browser in the back of it. It's like freaking out right now. But it's not. The rest of my computer seems to be fine, so we're just gonna pretend that that's not happening and hope that something doesn't cut out. Um, but what me and Ellen have been watching recently together was Andor. See, he hadn't seen it. We still have to finish it, which like
Beautiful,
it's
beautiful
it's
show.
so good. Uh, it I resonated like so hard with it. Um, and I think like there was like a part of the last episode that made me do a little cry. Um, I think there was maybe a couple parts that made me do a little cry. There was a couple parts. I remember the other part that made me do a little cry. Um, uh, I fuck J.J. Abrams. Fuck him. Fuck him. Um, that being said, there's something about I don't like J.J. Abrams. Um, I'm trying to remember the other thing he did, because it's an important like point. Let's see.
Lost? That's the big thing.
Did
He's
he? I mean, I knew he did Star Trek. He was a
hmm
part of the Cloverfield movies,
hmm
which are also kind of not super satisfying movies. I understand like why people really like them. But
Is there so the first one is actually so sorry, brain doing stuff. There's the first Cloverfield, which
oh
I threw up at the movies when I saw it when I was a kid because
my
I it
God. Your
had
parents took you to see Cloverfield as a little
um
kid.
so
How old were you?
long story, but yes, simply don't have time to tell it. 10 Cloverfield Lane, it's been a while, it's been a long time since that came out, but I remember enjoying it, but also as before I was like really a storyteller. And then I've not seen the Cloverfield Paradox because as far as I understand, this wasn't actually written to be a Cloverfield movie. They just kind of made it into one.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the concept. I just wish it was better executed because, again, it's if some oftentimes the thing about J.J. Abrams is that he comes up with an idea that he thinks is kind of cool, but he does it so last minute. And he's like, I gotta like change everything up to like do this and like make this work. I don't know why he needs to do that. You just save it for later, my guy. You could just like hold on to it and then like do something with it. Oh, like, I have cool ideas all the time that I'm like, that doesn't work here. I just save it, put it in my back pocket, and I'll save that for a later point. Cloverfield Paradox is like cool in theory. It's just like very poorly executed because the concept is that like all of these movies, part of what is a part of the Cloverfield Paradox is that it doesn't all take place within the same like it's like kind of the multiverse thing again. And so in the Cloverfield paradox, there's this big, I don't remember all the details, but there's this big thing that is supposed to help with an energy crisis that is currently happening on Earth. But it creates like a paradox in the process, which is we assume part of where the dude from the monster from the first movie came from, because like they are transported, the people in the station, the space station, are transported to the other universe and then on their home universe like shit, it's going to shit. And then strange things start happening because they're not supposed to be in this universe. So like really strange fucky shit keeps happening on the ship. And like again, it's pretty cool in concept, especially because I really enjoy surrealism, like in horror and strange paradox bullshit. It just like really like falls flat.
Something I want to talk about I need to get this in because I'll forget about it because I've thought about it
Mm,
a couple of
put
times and
put
been
it
like, I
in.
should bring this up on the podcast. Have we talked about on the podcast ideas? Like when people just have ideas and they're like, this is a whole thing and it's not. Have I gone through this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Sorry. Continue. I just wanted that as a note so I don't forget about it.
I'm just complaining about JJ.
Okay. Cool.
Well, and again, the whole mystery box thing is just like repeated in so much of his work, which is super disappointing. Um, uh, and how the like Star Wars inspires so much of what I do, but also then sometimes makes me like, uh, I don't like it. And that's where
So
I'll end about Star Wars.
valid. Um, Thinking about Star Wars.
I'm sorry.
The biggest problem. It kind of, I honestly touched on this a bit. I won't explain the source, but I might have gotten at this in our messages earlier in the week. I'll text you where this is coming from. Um, um, for your context. Um, but I don't want to bring that up publicly.
Okay.
Ideas, when people who exist, everything is just ideas. What if my character was an Aarakocra who shot guns? That's a cool idea. What's the character? What if there was a story where um uh I was a warlock, and but also an Asimar, and my parents didn't like each other. That's an idea. That's an idea. There's nothing else to that. What if uh what if there was a high school filled with monsters? That was a season of Dimension 20.
We're
I
really bringing Torch to the extreme tonight.
I'm this is I get so torqued to the extreme. I get torqued up to the extreme about this shit. I I and listen, Gabe Hicks,
Oh
you're
yeah.
fine. I it's didn't get very far in that season. I don't know if there's anything good about it. I just didn't really vibe with it. But people are obsessed with ideas and not stories, and it I see it all the time. The amount of it's that just came out, I see I see it all the time on the D&D twitters. What if this thing happened? What if that thing happened? What if you told a compelling story?
I
What if you
I
had a character arc? What if there were dimensions to your character? It haunts me. It
I
haunts me.
think that there is a time and place for ideas. And then you want to do a funny little one shot with it. There's nothing wrong with having fun. You know what I mean? You need to have fun. Heck, go have fun with your friends. It, but there is like a well, it's just what I said. There's a time and there's a place for it, and
You encounter
meh,
problems with ideas when you go past like 5 sessions. You cannot
yeah.
run on
It was kind
on
of what I was thinking is like if like ideas I think are fine for like funny little one shots. You want to have like a fun little one shot with your friends, you know? You just want to do just like a funny little thing for a session. Like fucking go for it. I don't care. I don't care how you enjoy D&D. Um but like you're right. After a certain amount of time, usually very early, there's not really anything else
yeah.
you can do with it.
Mhm.
Um and like I think that there like my time and place thing also like partially has to do with like the people that you're playing with and having an understanding.
I
There
think
is something to be said about like I've had like some people inquire about my games, none of which are currently in my games. I've had a couple people inquire about my games, and like immediately I'm like, you did not read my description. I know that you didn't read the description for the game. You definitely didn't read my DM description. Because like what makes you think that I'm here for whatever the fuck this is? Like but it's in ideas and or like the way that they enjoy D&D, like I immediately am like, no, nope, no. Um and it's a little just like a little soul crushing.
It's the worst thing I experienced, and I'm so glad I'm in a place. I'm in a place. I mean, this has generally been how I run things. Like even before I was like making the Lego money. You know what I'm saying?
Lego
Enough
money.
money to buy my Lego Rivendell set, the Millennium Falcon. You know, um, I am someone who where was I going with this? I know the tangent. I need to center myself back on the first track before I go on the second track. Um yeah,
You're
so
getting a little
I
too
ignore
torqued.
yeah, I'm getting too torn up. So I'm now in a position where I ignore messages from people when it seems like, you know, the worst opening message someone can send. So keep in mind there are now um 16 games on the schedule. One's not running. It's not going to fill before the first arc ends. It's the B side of the horror thing. I have 16 games on the schedule. This is okay. I'm gonna do my count 1 p.m. thing here. So I'm gonna appear, and when I appear, this is me sliding into your start playing DMs. It's and this
Okay.
is the first, and so I want you to get on my headspace.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just have your 3 games. You have multiple games each day.
Mm-hmm.
Um okay. So
I'm in it.
what level?
It says in the fucking thing.
It
Do go
does.
read.
It says twice now. In most of my games, it says in the party description and in the game description. The party description is like this party is currently at this level, and the game description says this campaign starts at what level? Which game? Which game? So I
Which
ignore
game?
messages like that because
It says in the
if the
thing.
thing that people are asking, what level, they have not read the description, A, and B, that is the thing that they care about, right? That the level, not the story, not anything. And that's what I a thing. So I'm conflicted in a thing. So I ended a game in the last couple of weeks. The players, most of the players, were just not the right fit. I felt like I was dragging them along in the story, and I was like really well and truly suffering trying to run this game because the characters were just disengaged, and there was a small period of time where or the players were just disengaged. The characters could have been from any setting, and not been different. Um, the when the players first reached out to me, 2 of them, one was asking about um like, oh, so no like I you know, classes or whatever from like Cobalt Press, like I can't do anything from that. And at the time I was like, I it's much easier for me to manage for my understanding of just published 5th edition material. It's just easier
Mm.
for me to run it like that. Let's keep it to that, you know, with the exception of like this is not appropriate in this setting, whatever. um but that's to me is a red flag. um um I because when people because that to me, when people are like, oh, can I like do this idea, like to me that's what it's saying, of like, oh, this idea in this thing is cool, I want to play it. And it's like, cool, so you don't want to engage with the story, you're not interested in the story, you want to play out an idea and be given free reign to do that. And that's not, you know, I'm paid to DM, but also I run settings and a world which is shared by dozens of other people. So everyone needs to come to the table and agree on something on some base level. Each setting, because it's in the same world, has to have the same logistics. So when someone is showing up and the first thing they're doing is not looking to see how they can buy into the world, huge red flag. Because usually if that's in the first opening messages, red flag. If someone asks about the story and then like once they have the ideas together, be like, oh, by the way, is this material okay? Fine, that's totally okay. Ask away. And I've become a bit more open to like cobalt press spells now. Um, but that those people were like very exemplary to me of like, here's a fun little idea. And no, like I had to kind of force the story onto them.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it just wasn't satisfying. It didn't feel, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't gratifying. And I was running enough games to not have to put up with that. Um
Mm-hmm. I would I would say, I mean, okay, in your game, the idea of running certain homebrew content is, I would say, not as much feasible. Um, I would say that I was gonna say that I think that there are some exceptions to that. However, I think that even in the instance I'm thinking of, it was also a situation of like they kind of already bought in and had like their character, and then
if
my
if
player Ian
someone
plays.
came to me, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say my I have a player Ian. He plays a homebrew class. However, it's kind of like it was a situation which like he already had like this is like the character. This is like the idea for the character and like where they're from, what they do for a living, what happened to them based on like plot things you've already set up. And I think it would be neat if instead of like doing something like making a like a like a warlock pact, there's this homebrew class that is like specifically about individuals who make pacts with devils, and so it is like you could technically use the same thing with warlock, and go that same story route, but because he had already kind of like thought about the character and why they would have like he had like a reason related to his backstory of why he would go and make a pact like that, and like the class looked fine and it worked with the world lore, that I was like, yeah, that's a thing that would feasibly happen and you could technically like work in with just a warlock pack, but with some more mechanics fleshed out for it, so I don't care. I think it's fine. Uh, but even then again, it was more of a situation of like the buy into the world and the want to engage with the world already exists. Instead of just immediately being like, I want to play this. Um, and that definitely like changes it because I think I would
Yeah.
feel a little bit different.
If someone came to me and was like, oh, I love this aspect of your world building. By the way, there's also this homebrew class that like I feel like really like fits into this thing
With
that
this,
maybe
yeah.
is doesn't fit with fighter or whatever. I'd be like, oh, I'd at least consider
Yeah.
taking a
Adds
look at
flavor
it.
to mechanics and like,
Yeah, yeah. Um, um, but I yeah, I have yeah. The amount, just players. There's so many people um um in like do not read, do not really wish to engage. They like the idea. And I found that just a little bit with people coming in from not people coming in from TikTok, um, but people who would reach out from TikTok. There was a good portion of people who liked the idea of being in a game who will reach out who actually don't have the time and no
Yeah.
they don't have the time, but it's like, ooh, this is a fun little thing to like pursue for like a couple of messages and then they kind of like stop.
Yeah.
Um,
I was worried actually when I started playing with you that I remember Elm had looked at me and was like, "Are you sure? Like you're gonna have the time for that?" But I'm one of those people who takes like commitments that I make really seriously. Like time commitments are really
mm,
serious to me. I try not to be late to things if I can help it. Although sometimes I'm usually like 5 minutes late to Sundays. But like I don't like to cancel on things last minute. I think that one Sunday that I was really tired and I still showed up for some of that was the
mm,
only time I had been like, holy shit, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking out of it. But I take time commitments really seriously. But a lot of people it is just like, you know, but again, I also think that what the thing about D&D that people like is they like the idea of a home game. They like the idea of being able to just like do whatever they want with their friends, which kind of like leads into a point, like something I was thinking about. So I was talking to a friend about D&D recently, and because I've been talking about the idea that I would like to eventually stream a game. However, I wouldn't just stream any of my games. I would like hand pick certain players, you know, um, because there's like the personal aspect of like people who click, but I need people who click and can also like I've talked about how I've had like really good, like especially with my paid games, some games with really good role players, and then more home game like situations where the players have really good energy between each other. You know, I've never had quite like the perfect mix yet. Um, as far as games that I've DM'd, and so I was like, if I was going to do something like that, I'd really like handpick the people who I would do that with, of like people who I think have like the role play and the narrative chops, but also like have like good connections. But that's not the point. The point is like I was talking about some of my players. I was talking about some of my home players, who um are like my good friends. But I would never critique um any of my paid players so like outwardly. Um in like well, I don't have many of them, so they could all take a fucking guess. But there is like an aspect of the like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and we've already kind of talked about it on the podcast of like the buy-in, not just the buy-in, and I was going to relate this to the empathy machine thing, where I don't necessarily think that people who interact with D&D like in this way are incapable of empathy, but I think they're in like really struggle with like suspending the disbelief of playing pretend, and they interact with it in the same way they'd interact in like a video game. Some people have like a really, really strong um ability to like connect. So even when they play a video game, they're incapable of picking the mean option. They don't want to be mean unless like something comes up in the game that they're particularly like, no, fuck you. They like really struggle with that like whole concept. Um, and then there are other people who like I don't know how to explain this, but it's like the way that I watch a couple of my home players interact with NPCs. And it's gotten better in one specific game we play in our long-term campaign. I think because they've had more time to sink into the character. Um, and so it feels more real to them. But then in the other campaign I played with them, it's like that was like the two other campaigns I played with them that gets lost immediately. Like there is like a lack of like investment, or like again a lack of like ability to like sink into it, to suspend your disbelief and be engaged in that way. And like they become eh, how do I put this, like an NPC is really just an NPC to them. And it's the same way that like if I've watched shows with some of these people, and like I'm like really good, like if I'm watching a TV show, I can really put myself in the shoes of a character, even characters I don't like, and understand where they're coming from. But like if I've watched like shows with some of these same people, and it's like kind of this attitude of like the inability to really like put yourself in the shoes of a character and understand where they're coming from and engage in that way. And it same way when they play video games, same way when they play D&D. And like I've been trying to figure out if there's a way that I can flip a switch in their brain, or if it's just kind of like not gonna fucking happen.
Um, I think the best chance that you have in like to try to like flip a switch, I think some people are kind of locked in. The best chance to try to flip a switch is just consequences of what, and like, but yeah, they have to do something bad enough to make them reflect on what they're doing. So it's like, oh, if they're just treating NPCs like little computer characters, um, but like not being mean to them, just not really engaging. There's nothing really
Oh no,
substantially
I
bad
mean, I
about it.
definitely mean like the way they like even speak to like it's like choosing the little bitch dialogue
Mm,
in video games.
mm,
And I'm like, why are you acting like I and there's a difference between this and somebody who's playing an antagonistic character.
mm.
There is. Because I
Yeah.
have players who play kind of little bitch boy antagonistic characters, but they still like interact with the NPCs in like a way that isn't just like you're just a silly little NPC, fuck
Mm.
you, you know?
Well, do you have the NPCs like respond in kind and be like, "How dare you talk to me like this? If I'm the server here, my father owns this place, and we're gonna kick you out. Now you don't have a place to stay." I
One
don't know
of
if I.
them, one my big offender. Okay, I have two offenders here.
Hmm,
They're my pals. I love them. Um, and I would tell this to their face. Just to be clear, these are things that I would tell them directly. One of them does that, and it's easier to recenter him. However, he never stays centered. It's easy to center him because he has strong reactions to things. It's like a running joke is that he's this like huge dude, but he's a little baby in reality, like and it's easy to kind of recenter him if somebody has like, especially if he says something hurtful and I have an NPC react in like I'm hurt way. It's really easy to make him go, oh, I'm so sorry. I should have said that. But he never stays. I can't quite bring him to a point where he's like always really centered in that. Um, but that's largely, I'm not gonna get into that. The other player, it's like I've already taught him the lesson. He learned it so in the long home game, like the home game, not just like our Spelljammers break, like the long campaign with all of these characters who are, like 10th, 11th level, have had tons of time to like get into these characters, right? um he's gotten better with this specific character about like being able to kind of like learn the lesson and the consequences. But I played in two other campaigns with him now, and I remember when I went into the new campaigns I was like, oh, he's learned a lot. I feel like it's going to be a little different. Incorrect. False. False. um and like this is partially because some parties, and sometimes it doesn't even matter if this player can do this because I've had this thing happen with other players in other parties, with the same players in different parties, where it's like if the whole party has a really good understanding of like, haha, funny moment, but we know how to bring the tone to a serious place if it needs to be there. I have a couple parties who are like not good at that. They're not very good at that. They cannot like pull it to a serious, like if it comes to a serious tone, and I'll be having a serious moment with another player, like they interject and it's like a thing, and I'm like, shut the fuck up. And like I think that affects this player a little bit. And in the two other games I've played in him with, it's been kind of that energy. And so I think he can get like really distracted by that. But also, again, I don't think he's had like this character that he plays in the long game. He's had so long and there's so much like personal investment that it changes things. However, there has been a variety of a whole fucking variety packed of like consequences to the way he speaks to people, both like hurt and anger. I almost one-shotted him one time. It's the Hut. This is the same player from the Hut story. Do you remember that story that I told you? I think I told you about that. Maybe I
Oh
didn't.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, so
The
my
Hut.
brain, you said the Hut, and I was like, Jabba the Hut,
Jabba the
Pizza
Hut.
Hut, Baba Yaga Hut. Okay.
All the Huts. Um, which I guess because I think this is a fun story to tell. I'll tell it. I'll tell it for listeners really quick. Where in Curse of Strahd, there's this witch inside of a hut. Um, and it just looks like a hut at first, and it's a construct, and it gets out on these huge roots, and then you fight it. I the characters approach the hut, and this player's character walks up to the hut, and without saying anything else or giving anybody the opportunity to speak, he yells into the hut, "I'm going to kill you." And I was like, okay, roll initiative. The hut gets up. The hut has 3 attacks. The hut hits him with all 3 attacks. And I could have just one-shot him, but I was like, no, let this be a lesson. Let this be a lesson. I never plan on punishing my players. However, if they do something dumb, you place stupid prizes. And this is something that I used to tell my players too. When I was first starting to play, I was like, you want to know how I'm going to run this as far as morality goes? Is like it's not just play stupid games, win stupid prizes. It's act like a monster, and like I'm going to you'll win that prize. I'm going to treat you. You're going to be treated like a monster. And like that was kind of one of those moments where like yeah, there's a witch in there. However, same concept. If you just walk up to somebody and start threatening them, they're gonna take action. They're going to react as if they are like their life is on the line. Everybody in the party was really like all kind of like looked up and were like, really, you fucking idiot. Because they all were like, we are also at stake here. Um, and I gave a player an opportunity to come collect the not quite dead body of this player and bring it back. And that kind of that one part was a significant like significant like moment for this player where he did kind of have like a little bit of like, okay, if I behave like an idiot, like Tucker's going to like respond in kind. And then over time with NPCs, he started to get a little bit better argument between his character and NPC, or like where he just like was very, and it wasn't necessarily a bad moment where like he was talking to an NPC whose sibling had died, and he was like, I don't know what your fucking problem is about the situation and about how the character was handling it. And like they got into an altercation because of it. Um and like so there's been moments like that. And he did, and again there was like a moment where like it did shift into a more like meaningful interaction instead of just like a consequence, and he was able to kind of take from it. But in every game following that game, I haven't been able to get him to like engage in the same way, regardless of the like the consequences that are going to happen. Um, there isn't like a real, I guess, like sort of an again investment. And I think that there are games where it's like again, like there are games where it's like, okay, you want to be like silly and funny, fine. And like in one of the games, I'm not really that concerned about it just because I'm it's not that serious of a game in one of them. Um, but it's just like at a certain point becomes a little like how do I say this? Like frustrating the way that like how impulsively this character is played of like the bit um again the inability to sort of like really engage with NPCs as if they were like another person. And again, I've had players who are antagonistic to NPCs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the NPC is not viewed like they're still connected in that way, you know. Elijah plays a really good example in my Saturday game as Hyde, who is a murder hobo, and he can play a murder hobo and still have this murder hobo connected enough with NPCs. And so there is just like this disconnect, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get that flip switched for this player, you know?
I think the reason people play with certain play styles comes from I would say mostly a maturity thing. And D&D as said, or TTRPGs, is a great way to like explore the depths of emotions and become more mature. But people do have walls. Everyone has their obstacles rather. And some the process of playing through a TTRPG will not break through those
Mm-hmm.
obstacles. Um it's just the like play style thing that I talk about a lot of some people think it's a video game and there's no consequences, and
Mm-hmm.
some people think that just the goal is real and nothing else exists, and some people think that, oh, the world exists, and then some people think that the emotions are real. And at a certain point on that line, like maybe from the world being real, then maybe the people and the emotions kind of become real, um if you're invested. But I think there's no like flip
Which,
switching. Yeah.
yeah.
Did I say
I've
flip
kind
switching?
of flip switching. Yeah, you
Switch
did.
flipping. Okay.
I feel like there's like a point of like how do I put this? Like a point of acceptance in that like some players are just like there's some people I'm just not meant to play with. Um and like there's been tons of people that I've been able to like really nurture that in, but it's just not gonna happen every time. Um uh and like I can do my best. Luckily, I mean the soon enough the home game that this player is invested in is going to be the only game I'm running with this individual. Um, and he was like, oh, I kind of like the idea of joining one of your paid games. And I almost kind of want to tell him, like, I don't think you're gonna have that much fun. um, especially because like this is like not just a game like the other games. I just run for the other two games he's in. I just run for my friends. Like you're running in my paid game, like consequences are heavy in these ones. And not in the sense that again, I'm not looking to like punish my players, but like if you say stupid things to people and you act like a little monster, like people are gonna treat you like a little monster. Um, and it's just like generally not going to be like super acceptable. uh, especially if I have other customers who are kind of like expecting a certain experience out of this. Um, and this connects back to like the home game thing of like some people I feel like are really looking for the idea of a home game. They get to go like have fun and be silly and do whatever they want with no consequences. And they don't read the DM description and realize that like this is not that game. I'm not like I there might be somebody out there running a game that you would really enjoy. This is not that game.
There's hundreds of DMs out there. There's thousands on this website.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Fine, look,
There's gonna be a silly little guy out there who's like, fuck yeah, ideas.
a lot of
And
people,
let's, you know,
yeah, just join open slots.
yeah.
And it's the most insufferable thing because those people are the most active joiners.
Hmm.
And a good portion of people either reach out or join, and they're just not, just shouldn't.
Hmm.
Um,
I do think that there are some people who like the idea of like intense character arcs and like arcs and like narrative, but they don't like the kind of like the patience that it
mm,
requires and like the work that it requires, which is unfortunate. I think that there's an expectation for payoff
mm,
like really fast, which is just not gonna happen.
yeah. Um, so last week I was very worried about players buying in because I last week and tomorrow is the end of technically this week. Um, uh, I am setting up a crossover for 8 campaigns, and in doing so, there's one player who was given the option if it was right for the character choice to like nuke everything. And I was really worried about giving that authority because it was like, this is true to the world, but I didn't trust this player. And I ended up working out great. Everything turned out really good. But as someone who's being paid for an experience by other people, part of that experience that is being paid for is the curation of other players
Mm,
across campaigns so that everyone is treating to some extent the world with the same degree of respect or reverence or whatever it is. um, and so what ended up happening was a couple of interesting character moments, which I was very relieved and happy about. I that's like the most I've been worried in a long time last week, which I was very happy to be wrong about. Whereas like this could go so wrong, and it's not a thing that I've done wrong. It's a thing that it's just like this unfortunate circumstance, and I'm okay with like living with the tension of that and playing it off as like the evil guys do the evil thing. But it's like um I was worried specifically about storytelling um in amongst my players. And it ended up like when someone is the thing that we're talking about the switching of or the flipping of switches.
mm,
um I think when someone is bought into the plot and likes to role play, whether it's deep or not, in a world that itself is has depth. I think people fall into the depth. That's what I've seen with a couple of different players who, and the one in particular who has had little moments here and there, was never really committed. Um, and had a moment where he was really faced with something very important, and some depth came out. I was so happy that that happened of all the outcomes. Um, so I think that again, a lot of what I think storytelling is in a TTRPG sense, is reaching for the most truthful thing, and the there is a truth inherent to each setting or each world or each story is being communicated. And something that someone I'm collaborating with, who's in the Monkey Cool Trexia, on a different setting, um, noticed about my world is that what is true to my world is that being good, um, uh, doing the right thing will be rewarded, if it is fought for in the right way. The bad people aren't going to just roll over, and when someone says, "Ah, I'm going to do the right thing," they're not going to roll over and give up. But the right thing does have a system of reward. Specifically in this setting, um, there in the thing that you're dealing with. And at this point, I don't think there's any spoilers I can say because it's like everyone's caught up. But the storytelling and setting is that people are getting corrupted by this god of lies. Their faiths are being corrupted because each faith fundamentally has a flaw that makes it there's a vulnerability that can be
Mhm.
exploited. And this cult is exploiting those faiths to create enough corruption to bring through these evil beings. That's the gist of it. Um, but in the confrontation of character to character, PC to NPC, and the engagement of themes, you have this thing that is like, if you fight for redemption, if you fight for forgiveness and reaffirming and restoration of faith, that is more likely to succeed and get the right outcome than it is not. The first instances where I had a party really, or it was the first party before there are any other parties, pick up on this was before a big battle, and these like really strong knights were coming for the players. They're gonna kill them. They tried to kill them, and um, they kill most of the knights. And there's like one who survived, who they're interrogating, and I think I told this story last episode as well. But the gist of it is they just went, um, he was like, "What are you going to do with me?" And they're like, "Well, nothing. Actually, we're not going to do anything. Um, we're going to put faith in you that you're going to make the right decision. You're free to go."
I remember the story, yeah.
And that was like you. That was the moment, the first time in the series of events where they hit it on the head. They hit on the head. And so they tried that again, and they failed because there's a secondary thing that they weren't aware of in a larger context. But ultimately they also did succeed. It was like it was a complicated situation. But basically, like coming off of that high of like, oh, this is how we beat them, the characters showed up in the middle of the city that's like rife with corruption, and were like, we understand what your perspective is. We understand why you think we're the bad guys. We know the stories that's been held. Here's our perspective. If you think that we are wrong, genuinely and earnestly, kill us, because that would be the right thing to do. Do it. It's okay. Like, I understand. And in that moment, we had this character who, because of some like fuck shit they had done, they were able to see the corruption. Well, it was like a technically a consequence. Like they're like their body was decaying, but through that they could like see that they're like where people were corrupted. And in that room, although there's all these people who are still corrupted, they could see like the minds changing. And it didn't result in everyone coming together, but it resulted in a rift in the like in those people who are like, this other dude who's our leader has been very forceful in his wording. And when there are like, in a world where gods are real, I think this is also part of the storytelling. In a world where gods are real, and following the ways of a god or the teachings of a god is how you get power. um uh you can actively reflect on what you are doing, and based off of the like texts and holy books, be like, oh, when presented in a situation like that, you can be like, oh shit, I'm not following what's written here. I've been following what I've been told. And so if the person that I'm working for does not align with this thing that is like the word of the gods, that person's corrupt, and that means I'm corrupt. And so I need, like, that's a reasonable outcome of the situation. So like that's what happens. Like that is the truth that is held to. I think where I was going with this, but I think the general idea is that like, um um I've watched 40 or so players buy into this idea and learn this lesson, um and engage in
Hmm.
that story. um Yeah, I think buy-in maybe. That was my point. I don't know. I'm
Mayhaps.
gonna drink water.
Um, you drink your water. Although that did kind of like make me think that at some point, I think we should talk about like the process of God creation and like what they mean in like in world building. You know what I mean?
Have I told you about why my gods are the way they are?
We have discussed it. There's probably things that I don't know, but I have gotten maybe one or two Jesse lore dumps regarding gods in your world. And I also have like a really, really specific way that I treat like the idea of godhood in my game. So I just feel like it would be something interesting for us to go over. Um and kind of compare and contrast because it's always one of those things that I'm really interested in kind of in any like both in like DM and storytelling but any piece of media that I write is I always kind of want to pick the writer's brain about like the process that they went through but also like what that means for the world um both in like a I guess like a metaphorical way and in the literal sense of like what it is to be a god and how they view that because it differs so much between person to person. So I was like, that is something that we should discuss. I feel maybe next
Yeah,
time.
I have.
But
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm just gonna. That's it.
Okay, I have one last thing that I want to bring up. God's thing is a juicy topic, and I'm already kind of on a tangent about a couple of opinions
He's
that I
like, don't
have
you dare.
about, but um, so I want to talk about Brennan Lee Mulligan because
Brennan.
I was talking a lot of shit about Critical Role in the last two episodes or so. But I also, no one's perfect. And
No.
I do have a problem with, and again, I'm being a little animated about this.
Mark
It's
it, Jesse.
like in the grand scheme of things, it's just like is someone who like thinks about storytelling their whole it's I don't have a break from thinking about storytelling, right? Um, it's my whole thing. So Brendan Lee Mulligan needs to learn how to shut the fuck up. With explaining his what he explains too much. The reason I say this, he's a very high concept person as a DM, and in the most recent season and Never After, for those of you who are watching, the concept is it's a okay, it's a horror game. It's a comedy horror thing, which to begin with, there's elements of how Brennan runs horror which I don't think are very effective to me personally. Um,
We need to talk about that also at some point.
yeah, I really love running horror, and I
Me as
found
well.
I'm not a great horror person generally. Like I don't like consuming horror media. Well, to some extent, I'm getting better at it. But so the concept of the season is that it's fairy tale characters in a universe where when
Are
a
you doing a
character,
fucking bit or can I just not hear you?
can you not hear me? Am I quiet or what?
No, like no audio. I can hear you now.
Okay.
But the I was like, is he doing a bit or can I generally not hear them?
No.
Uh,
Um, I was talking the whole time.
oh,
Um,
okay. I was like, I took my brain like multiple like the long moment of like, what? Your audio just like
hmm,
gone complete. I'm curious to see if it's just on my end or like when you run the clip
yeah.
back if the audio is just gone. But
Um,
everything you just said, say it again.
okay. So it's the new season of Dimension 20. I think it's coming to an end tomorrow, but the concept is fairy tale characters in a universe, not a world, a universe, or kind of in which if they die, they come back in a like different version of events. Um,
I kind of hate
and
that.
there is this effort by these different people in the world to um, like whenever people die, they like they like, I don't know, like when it's complicated, is stupid complicated. It's needlessly complex. And I find that the amount of world building explained to the, like, literally it's like this third or fourth episode, Brennan sits down with each player individually and explains in a slightly different way the mechanics of this world. This is the other thing about, so just a couple of things, gimmicks and ideas.
I
it's
was
it's
I was just about to say this feels very gimmicky.
it's a big gimmick, and it's a needless gimmick, and it gets in the way of the story. I got really frustrated very quickly, and I stopped watching after like episode 5 or 6, because I can't really see a way in which this is going to continually be entertaining for me. um like the gimmick has gotten in the way of the story for me, in a way that like things like the Unsleeping City or A Crown of Candy really did not, of being really fantastical, interesting ideas that um were character driven and focused, and anyways. So um big gimmick, and then like almost no mystery. Like the you I think when you experience something like that, the last thing you should do is explain the mechanic, right? I think that is a lesson that you could take from a show like The Leftovers, where it doesn't explain what actually happened till the last episode.
Hmm.
And it doesn't even kind of matter as well. I think that's the other thing, is that the mechanics of how something happens in a world don't fucking matter. And so there's almost for me like an irreverence to mechanic to some extent. I get really tangenty and stuck on explaining things, but I try not to over explain this until someone asks about it.
Mm.
So it's like the opposite of the mystery box of, look at everything in this box. And it's like, okay, well, that's kind of disappointing, actually. I like, oh, that's a cool
Hmm.
idea, but now the like the interest, the mystery, the spark is gone. You
Hmm.
killed it. So
I,
that's my kind of big gripe I've noticed with Brennan, is that he's too much into explaining. Now, on the other hand, Worlds Beyond Number. I know you're probably not listening. I know, because it's available for free. There's a bunch of stuff on the Patreon that's like extra content. Worlds Beyond Number is on the total opposite end. There are a couple of things, minor things, that aren't even um um really storytelling things. They're just like little blips that come up because of certain things. I wouldn't even vocalize a complaint about that. Complete opposite. Phenomenal storytelling, beautiful, best ever. I love that's it's aspirational the way stories are told in that one. Um, but yeah, I just really have an issue with that side of Brendan's DMing, of just, look at this concept, and it's like,
I tend to like him better than Matt, in the
oh
sense
yeah,
that
yeah.
like as a person, like the way he talks and like there's just more moments that like I can think of that I'm like with Brennan that I'm like, oh, I enjoy that. However, um, there is I can relate to the struggle a little bit. It's something that I sometimes do on accident. Is like talk a little bit too much, and I'm like, okay, shut the fuck up now, Tucker, be quiet, no more. um, but like something that's really two important notes about that. Uh, Gimmicks have the same problem as ideas. Is that like you're gonna get 5 sessions in and it doesn't matter anymore. I have a setting I'm about to drop that is like I guess like vaguely like it's like pirate inspired, but that didn't come across because I wanted the gimmick. that the reason that like if there's anything in my world that is ever like a concept that somebody might use as a gimmick, it's usually because there is a like an actual there was a thought process on my end, another why tangent of like where are these people located, what sort of environment are they in, and what is kind of the natural like what directions that could that have gone in like at the point of view of like society and civilization. And so like this kind of like pirate area, like that's why I got to that point. And it's not going to run off of like there's going to be it's probably not going to be quite as piratey as some people who I imagine would see that and be like, oh fuck yeah. It's probably not quite as piratey as they'd like it to be. But like that's why they came along, because it makes sense for the area and it makes sense based off their resources. Um and but for the most part I really try and stray away from stuff like that because it's just not going to work long term. Second, like a really big thing that I learned, and I learned very quickly, is because I've always like since I was like 13, 14, I've been very interested in writing and like telling stories. And something you learn really quickly about world building and introducing people to a new world and new ideas. Now, this also kind of falls apart when you play with gimmicks, but is the concept that like you shouldn't place all the information about this new world in front of readers, players, whatever, right off the bat. It should kind of be given to them as you go, as it makes sense. And then there are parts of the world that like the parts of the world building that that honestly are just never going to like come to the forefront. You're not going to see it, and that's okay. Um and maybe you can talk about it in some out of like, you know what I mean, if somebody's interested, but it's never going to be there at the front, and that's all right. It probably shouldn't. Um and like the way that like certain writers and certain DMs to decide to give out information. And like to some extent, like I understand that like mistakes are made here and there with that. Especially when you're DMing in the sense that like this isn't a book that I can go back and edit, like everything like that I say is what I fucking say. Like I can't go back and edit that and like erase player memory. So like I get when there's like fumbles with that, because sometimes I even fumble with that a little bit. But even that concept, even if you did that really well, that's going to fall apart when you're playing with a gimmick, and there's not a lot of substance there anyway. um I guess that's like my big point about that. If I don't like gimmicks, like look, I feel a certain way like with ideas where I'm like I kind of get it, but like gimmicks really like grind my gears. I'm like
Yeah.
gimmicks.
I feel like people will put like gimmicks and try to place them. I feel like the thing with Never After is a gimmick has been placed where trying to function as a setting. The setting is a gimmick, and that really has things fall apart for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine people are still liking, Dimension 20 has a bunch of fans, but people are still liking it. You said
But that
something.
being said, sorry, go ahead. You say the thing, then I'll say a thing.
Okay. Um
Conversations.
conversations back and forth. Um uh I'm so willing to also let other people talk, but I will just this one time. That's not even true. I feel like I try to stop myself and say things all the time anyway. You mentioned something about not front loading players or audiences with information.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that so much. So this is going to be like a framed as a piece of advice for starting campaigns. Start campaigns, introduce the characters however you're going to do. I think something that Dimension 20 does great is introducing one character at a time. What's a little vignette? lets us understand the character. How do they meet up with the other people here? Whatever. Um, um, Start them in a feeling, in a state, in a movement. Do not start a campaign by dumping all the lore you thought of. My biggest fucking and it's not even a big problem, but like Lord of the Rings does it bad. The Critical Role animated series did it bad. Like Wheel of Time did it bad. You like so just every series that's done that, it's always bad. And I watch Critical Role every week. But I have a lot of thoughts about it because I'm a storyteller and very invested, and I very consistently encounter things that make me reflect and be like, why is that like it is? And I made a TikTok about this, but the very first episode of campaign 3 of Critical Role, there is like a 10-minute exposition. Matthew, shut the fuck up.
This is why I can never get into Critical Role. It's like that same thing. You hit me with a 10-minute exposition and I'm already clocked out. I'm not going to stay.
And here's
I have more important things I could do.
the problem is though, is that when you have there are a bunch of nerds, and it's like not even necessarily a flaw that people like that stuff, because people are invested in that world and they like it, and you can get away with it. Like there's comedians will talk about how when you're famous, like the first 5 minutes are for like the comedian, and
Mhm.
then you have to tell jokes. And I feel like that's the same thing you could say is true about Critical
Yeah.
Role or Dimension 20. Like the first 10 minutes of a new 100 episode long campaign is for Matt and the cast to give a
Yeah.
10-minute piece of exposition. Doesn't change the fact that it's bad storytelling. Like
Which,
I from a but even then, to kind of play a bit of devil's advocate, I am very much looking forward to the idea that in the next campaign that I run after Folia, and Actios, that I will be able to present a lot more information about the world to all of these players, and they will be much more willing and interested of buying in,
yeah.
of rather than I can get Svednam is mostly homebrew races, and I'm amongst 60 some players going to be interest in that. And I'm very excited about that. But
Mhm.
even then, I want to communicate as little as I can, as much as I need to,
Yeah.
as little as I can. I feel like that
Be,
general as much as you need, as little as you can, across a lot of things,
be
is an important
concise.
rule.
That being said, I also want to like because I'm really big on this as a person. Anybody like watching this, you like Critical Role. Because I'll shit on Critical Role all the time. You like Critical Role. I'm a very big person in like in the sense of like I don't like something, I think it's bad. Fuck me, fuck my opinion. It like really doesn't matter that much. Enjoy like people enjoy things in very different ways. Some people do. Some people they're invested, they like the 10-minute exposition. I can't. I can't do it. That being said, am I a little stupid slut for Lord of the Rings? Yeah. So I get it. I fucking get it. but but that was just like a big thing that like I was like be a little bitch about Critical Role. But you're right. Some people do just like that. That's fine. They can like that. That's perfectly okay. People can like things and they don't I don't necessarily think that something has to be good for people to enjoy it and like be valid in enjoying a thing. As somebody who like regularly enjoys camp, one of my favorite movies is fucking Interview with a Vampire. Um, I understand liking something that is kind of stupid, and it being really good because it's kind of stupid, or like not even like the full thing being stupid, but it has just some really like the moments and you still enjoy it. There was something important I was going to say before, but I didn't remember what it was. Oh, however, I do think that that like a big thing that pulls people to a lot of D&D that is like recorded, like Critical Role, and like that that whole what really draws people to stuff like that. And it ties into this problem that we've been talking about throughout the entire episode of like people really like the idea of a home game. And I get it. I really do. And I feel like that's what also like keeps them invested is that they really like the idea of the home game. That idea is really appealing to them and they're looking for that and they're in a constant state of looking for it. And I do like really understand. I understand that concept very well because like when I first started like wanting to play D&D, guess what I was doing? Watching people on the internet play D&D and being and really liking the idea of a home game. I started off watching like Rooster Teeth. They had a D&D thing for a while. I actually hold to this day that I think I really, really liked their DM, and I think I aspire to like be that patient as a DM because they were such a nightmare of a like if this was my party, I'd shoot myself. They are such a nightmare of a party, and they exemplify a lot of the bad shit we've talked about. They're very entertaining, but they also push that like home game feeling. I'd say that a lot of people do it so much better than them. That being said, if you knew Rooster Teeth as a company, it's like really not that surprising. And they have the most like patient DM to ever fucking grace this earth who can put up with their shit all the time. And you can like see it in his eyes sometimes when they do something, and you're like, I believe in you, Frank. Um, but so I get the feeling. And then for me, it was like actually playing D&D and like getting the role play aspect of it being like, oh, actually, I like this shit. This is so much better than whatever the fuck I thought I wanted from this before. So I get the feeling of wanting a home game, but also like like I guess like be a little bit more intentional. And you just don't there's like so many people that I realize like they just I don't know if it's like a lack of a grasp on like not just like what D&D is but like the community around D&D, like not I how do I
I
put it, like
think
understanding how to like intentionally search for a DM that appeals to you and like plays in a way that is good for you and what questions to ask instead of just like kind of spewing stuff at the first DM that they see, you know, and
yeah,
assuming that that's like they're gonna get it.
yeah. Like when you first start out in TTRPG spaces, the first DM is what you get, and you got to learn, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
there's something I think I mentioned this last week as well, but with Critical Role, the reason I keep coming back is because I've watched them for like 5 years now, maybe more, like since before I moved to Toronto. So yeah, like 5 years. Um, I'm invested in the people. I like Matt and Marisha and Sam and Travis and these people. Um, I like seeing them play games together. Um, but they're just playing a game where they could be much more intentional about telling a story. And again, that's fine. A lot of people like that. It doesn't have to be um like um what's it called? It doesn't have to be the greatest piece of storytelling
Oh
out
yeah.
there, but as things like Worlds Beyond Number are rising, and like Dimension 20 being a bit more even I don't think Dimension 20 here and Critical Role are even comparable. They're just different.
Yeah.
But like as like new mediums arise, it would be nice to see those people get a grasp of like what this could be. Because I think that's like my thing of like I see what this could be. I'm designing a system of what this could be. I'm
Hmm.
constantly like I have all these and I'm trying to make it work with just like regular people. Who I think there's also something to be said about just like how more so in people's like later 20s and early 30s, and those that like generation of millennials, um uh as you experience life and learn about life, pick up some like better kind of human instincts that are great to apply to like a TTRPG. Like some of the most wonderful players, specifically one that I just got to see today in a session zero that has been off for like a couple of months. Is just like I'm his first DM, and he's such an emotionally grounded player. Is just so um uh good. Like a lot of I don't get into it, but I there's a lot of players I like that I have who are just like as people, like the reason they're good at D&D is because they're good at being people.
Mhm.
Anyways,
I
I
mean, I would, um, I'm gonna give these quick points and then we'll fuck off. Um, A, I I think it is absolutely perfectly fine to just engage with D&D as just like a fun little thing. If it is fun for you, if it's like a fun thing you can do to like relax and just like vibe, fuck yeah, do it. I'm so glad that you have that as like a something you can go to that like is just a good time. I think that anything in life, video game, whatever that can help you decompress and that you just have a good time with is a good thing, you know? Fuck yeah. My advice to players engaging in a paid DM space would be like who want that is like absolutely go for it, but be very intentional, with what you're looking for. Um and be considerate of the DM's time because it's the um especially because there's so much work that goes into it, like outside of just running the session that like is I don't get paid to sit here and brainstorm. You know what I mean?
I
So
was thinking about this a couple of days ago, in the last couple of days, that um I'm getting paid for like actively running sessions. But at this point, like my job takes up my whole week. And that's fine. Like that's fine.
mhm,
Like I could choose to not do that. That's something on me. But
mhm. And
yeah.
I have a lot of players who are very considerate of my time. Who are like, I don't want to create more work
Mm,
than for you because like you're not getting paid for this time. I have like very strongly thought about like, and I'm a long way from this. Because I just like don't have a big player base. Although I'm about to drop like three fucking games at once. Like just put out three games and then solely focus, like once those are out, just solely focus on getting those filled for a while.
mhm.
Once I have kind of like multiple things that people can join and different slots, but um, but I've thought a lot about how much um like my DM style and how like very involved it is, and about like an eventuality of like getting to a point where like ideally it would be a thing of like I'm doing so much more work with players than just running the session. And like one, not just on like creating the world. I'm not even talking about like when it comes to world building. I'm talking about like one-on-one work that I do with players about their characters is so much more, you know? Um and about like getting to a point where I was like, I should have charged. Like I probably should have started a little pricier than this, and like eventually being like, I mean, if you want that experience, that's a lot of work that I put in, and I'm just getting paid for the session that's happening. Even though it takes up so much of my time, and I am in a constant state of like I work most days,
Yeah.
at least a little bit every day, and then some days all day. But I'm only getting paid for like the 3 to 4 hours that I'm running a session. um, but the point being, people who are looking for that experience, be intentional and looking for that experience. Read the DM description, like, have I guess a little bit more mindfulness about what you were searching for. Because again, I don't think there's any problem with interacting with D&D in a funny and silly way, but also because um I think, right, the whole thing about like, oh, good role players, like they're good people, they have you're right, um but also it's like there is an aspect of engaging in D&D in the way that we engage with D&D and like our like really like our best players do, like the way they engage with D&D, that is also like a skill. You aren't just like you can have like a good grasp on it, right? Like some people are, naturally kind of like with and that's not just D&D, but with a variety of skills, there are people who will be not more a little bit more naturally inclined to a skill. Anybody can learn that skill, but some people there's a little bit more of a natural inclination. However, you still have to build the skill. You are still actively learning how to do the thing. And especially with storytelling and role play, there is no like, oh, I've like reached the end of this and I can do you know what I mean? Like you are in a constant, probably for the rest of my life, I will be building this skill. And I will never stop like continuously building the skill. There will always be something I can do better or learn. But it is a skill. And some people, like this is something I would say about that player I kind of talked a lot about earlier, is like, is because like there's like the talking about the switch, and I'm kind of like realizing this, and this happens to me all the time, where I'll start talking about something and I'll realize something about it as I'm talking about it because my brain is like choo choo choo, and then my mouth just like is not keeping up. Um, um, but like it's not even necessarily a switch, and I'm like bleh, I shouldn't have like used those words because like I now realize that that's not what I want at all. Um, More so like a way that I can teach this individual this skill that I haven't like been able to do before because it is a skill. Some people, I do think that there is a switch and it just doesn't ever get turned on because like low empathy or they just like their brain doesn't work, and you know what I mean. But for the most part, everybody there's skills out there that even people who are really bad at it, they can learn it eventually. And this is kind of like my thing with that player is like he'll look at me and be like, I'm just not that creative. And I look at him and go, no, you just haven't built the skill yet because it is a skill. It's not something that you just like, yeah, some people naturally incline, but it is something you can build. However, I don't fault people who are not, because you're just simply not interested in building that skill. There's plenty of things that I'm just like in building the skill of and that I just want to interact with in a stupid, silly way. You know, I don't play Call of Duty so that I can be like really good at the 360 no scope or whatever the fuck. I play Call of Duty so I can laugh really hard when I get blown up with a grenade and die 1,000 times and not be good at the game. Like it doesn't matter if you're like good at it. As long as you're my biggest thing with D&D is ultimately like have fun. It's a game. And if you're having fun is taking it really seriously and fucking going hard on the role play and storytelling, and that's what you want to do, like you do it. But it's still a game. You should be having fun. This is my big thing. You don't need because I feel like there's so much not that I fault us for this. We talk a lot about like storytelling and like the annoyance with certain players and whatnot. But I want to reiterate that like at the end of the day, the biggest thing I'm concerned with is like go have fun as a person. Like go be happy and like enjoy things. Just make sure you are not, imposing on other people in the process, and,
Yeah.
and be intentional and mindful with the time of others.
Yeah.
Um,
But
That's my big thing. But like, do
yeah,
whatever the fuck you want.
that goes, yeah, but that just goes circles back around to like read the description. Like you
Honestly,
know, yeah,
this is just Tucker and Jesse taking a really, 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 really long time to tell you to make sure you read the DM description.
yeah,
Super important.
yeah, because it's literally like the on one hand, I don't expect all my players to be good storytellers, but anyone who reads the description of my game and understands it will have some inclination to be like, oh, this is a story being told to some extent, or like
Mhm.
there's something deeper going on here, um, uh,
Yeah.
and that draws my interest. But that's not always the case. Anyways, you mentioned something. You said you wanted to compare and contrast how we talk about God.